me to chair this panel. What I will do is I first quickly introduce myself, and then I give also the opportunity for our debate and panel members to do so. And while I'm finishing my introduction, I will give some questions, things to talk about to the panelists. So you better write a question because we didn't prepare, but that gives the nicest results, you will see. So the title is Green Growth Opportunities. That makes me believe that it's about doing business together. So that's already a good start. First of all, who is Flanders Cleantech Association? We have been founded and we're still sponsored by VITO. VITO is the Flemish Institute for Technology Research, and it's merely about sustainable development and clean technologies, green technologies. We're cooperating very much with Tyre, which is the Energy and Resources Institute of Delhi, and together we have a biannual event. Once it's in Delhi, once it's in Brussels. It's called the Brussels Sustainable Development Summit, and it's a copy-paste, analogly, of course, of the Delhi Sustainable Development Summit. Yeah. So that's as an introduction. Flanders Cleantech Association, first of all, you have been introduced to what is Flanders, which part of Belgium is it? To remember, it's the highly industrialized northern part of Belgium. We're very densely populated, we're very industrialized. Just to imagine, we have a lot of rain in this part of West Europe, but our aquifers are dry because of high industrialization. For instance, 25% of the vegetable frozen industry lives here from Flanders, so that says something to the rest of Europe. We have a chemical cluster, which is the first in Europe, after Houston, which is the largest one in the world. So a chemical industry with anchor points like Antwerp, Rotterdam, Rhine-Ruhr, which means a lot of water usage. So the problems that you would find in India, perhaps we also have them, and perhaps that's why we believe that we also have a nice region to start explore and find innovative clean technologies. And that word innovative is something I will do later. We'll do something later. The focus of our association, which is 220 member companies, most of them are SMEs, but also large corporations like Umicore, Solvay, they are also members of our association. The ultimate goal is to start cooperating with the rest of the world. So that's how we want to help them and offer a platform. Our focus regions are India, China and the Middle East. Why India and China? You can guess it's a very mathematical reason. If you have sustainable technologies which you can share with 2.5 billion people, that makes a huge difference. So it's a very mathematical but smart choice, we believe. So that is about Flanders Cleantech Association. Now we get into our subject. I think we have to talk, but you can do whatever you want during your interventions, about European India clean technology, and then the word transfer I hate, because I started to think it's exchange. That's our subject. And I start to talk about three things, and I would like you to elaborate, to comment, to fight the suggestions that I made, and to give good examples if you came across them. First of all, Europe, and especially West Europe, they always think we have innovations and let's export them. And what you then see is that we better were smarter and left out the last mile of this innovation, because if you want to have a good result of green growth promotion with 2.5 billion people, perhaps that last mile of innovation wasn't necessary because it makes the product very unaffordable. So that's one of the statements that I would like you to comment on. For instance, I give some examples myself. Perhaps these 2.5 billion people, a large part of them need light. Perhaps they don't need LED light already. Of course, I like innovation, but let's face it, if it makes things unaffordable, are they the right things to do? Other example, in Europe, we are now not only avoiding emissions, we're also capturing and using and commercializing CO2. Is this something that would be affordable with technologies when we go into 2.5 billion people's market? Other one, functional food. We even use algae to derive the high added value nutritional ingredients to make better food ingredients, to make functional food. Perhaps we have to start with food. So that's the first one. Aren't we trying to be too innovative if we think about Europe and how we promote innovation to make it benefit for the rest of the world? The second one, by leaving out this innovation, even then we can learn a lot. I give an example. It's not about downscaling a product. If you go with a product which you invented as an entrepreneur from Europe to these emerging markets, you might find out that trying to fit it, trying to adapt to that market makes new challenges, gives you new challenges. You need to innovate in a different way, which is also an innovation. So stop using the word downscaling for emerging markets. It's upscaling. Third one, and that's a question, because we have quite some nice setting here. When I came across, and the observations I did with my members trying to get money, for instance, to go into emerging markets which complete different scales than they were used to, they came across all kinds of financing instruments, subsidies, which you can have a certain opinion about, corporate venture funds, and I'm glad to have Fabienne from Michelin here. Yeah, is that correct? Yes? We can talk later. And other systems are, for instance, venture capitalists or fundraisers who then start to find nice innovations to say, okay, I want to have a share and I will support you with money and perhaps with content and teams and so on. That were my three statements where I would like the four panelists first shortly introduce yourself and then comment on them. If you want to involve the audience, please do so. In your proportion should be better than mine, so take 1/5 presenting yourself and your organization, because most of them probably are known. I can imagine that Mario, for instance, wants to explore a bit better. So 1/5, one for your presentation of your company and who you are in that company, and the other for commenting on these statements. If somebody now has another statement which they want to put here, please do so, but otherwise we kick off. Please, who will start? Fabienne?
Thank you. Good afternoon. So my name is Fabienne Goyenech. I work for Michelin. For those who don't know, Michelin is a tire company. We develop, we manufacture, and we sell tires basically everywhere in the world for any kind of engine that rolls. So if you came by the metro, we may have been on a Michelin tire. If you came by car, if you came by bus or by a scooter, you may have used a Michelin tire, or even by plane, according to where you come from. So you may wonder, what's the link between a tire, which is round, black, not very sexy, let's tell the truth, and green growth? The link is not immediate, and yet there is an important impact on tires to green growth and to energy efficiency, and that's why we thought we could elaborate a little bit on that. Before commenting on your three questions, I will try to explain why tire has an impact on energy efficiency. Well, when your tire rolls, it has what we call the rolling resistance. You know, it's not a smooth process to roll. And this rolling resistance accounts for 1 tank out of 5 when you want to put petrol in your car. So think about it. 1 tank out of 5, and when it comes to a truck, it's 1 out of 3. So when you have that in mind, you might think, okay, this tire does have an impact on the petrol I use, and so on the CO2 we are emitting. So the question is, how do we develop green growth for India, but are we, if I understand correctly your question, are we making unaffordable products? Well, the answer to me is no. Why that? Because what Michelin tries to develop is to have what we call tires with low rolling resistance, which will use less CO2 emission and thus less petrol. So the idea is that when you buy a tire which has a lower rolling resistance, you will use less petrol, and in the end that is positive for the environment, and that is also positive for your money, because you will use less petrol. So the question is not having a high technology that we export. We have a factory in India, we produce high-level tires in India. The question is more, how do we make sure that we have the regulatory tool in place to leverage the potential that is in the product? And if we look at what the EU has done, but not only the EU, you should have. So I hope I answered your questions.
Yes, very well.
Thank you. And so I pass the floor to Mario.
Thank you, Fabian. Thank you, everyone. My name is Mario Moya. I come from Spain. I'm the managing partner of Adastra Ventures. We're a consulting firm, a strategic consulting firm, and we are supporting and helping the growth and many times the survival of small and mid-sized technological companies. Some of them are clean tech, some others are bio, but all of them comes from the scientific background. So we could say that we don't work with many internet companies. So well, all your questions are very provocative, and indeed, well, I have many insights and even dilemmas, because sometimes one thing and the opposite are true. But I would like to first talk about in the sense of sustainability. I think that the key is the future of energy in general. So everything I can think about innovation and sustainability, I go to energy. So I cannot go to any other field. So the core is going to energy. So so talking about the future of energy, sometimes I feel that there is an English saying. I'm gonna try to say it. Sorry for the British people. I think the saying is like something like pennies wise, pounds foolish. So we are all the time thinking about efficiency, and I think we need to work on efficiency. But I think that really the sustainability of our planet is not going to be only about efficiency. It's going to be really about new sources of energy, a real disruption in energy. Because I have been checking figures and data before coming here, and we have doubled the use of energy in the last 30 years. And the trends, so we see the data from the World Bank, the trend is that this is going to happen again. So in countries like India, that they are growing, you cannot tell them don't use energy, as you said. So they need to turn on the light, and perhaps the light is not a LED light. So they're gonna use more energy, and the developed countries, they are gonna remain the use of energy. So they may be more efficient, but they also are. There is like, okay, I want to be more efficient, but I use more energy. I want to be more efficient. So at the end, they will have like a plateau in the use of energy. So in general, what I feel is that we are working a lot in innovation about efficiency, but not working a lot about really finding this new source of energy or this really disruption. There are some private initiatives, for example, Bill Gates Foundation. I know that they are investing a lot of money to really try to find. They are betting in nuclear, but really the only two sources of energies that don't create CO2 is the renewables and nuclear. So either you choose one or the other. You need to really come with something new. and well, that's my point. So well, I will try to answer the provocative questions afterwards. So I hope we will have a next round because I don't want to take longer. So I pass the ball to you.
Thank you. Please, Dirk.
Good. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure for me, for Eurochambers to be here on this summit. We've been very much involved also with the previous editions, and congratulations to the EU-India Chambers, Sunil, the chairman, for bringing us together again. Pleasure to see you again. As some of you may know, Eurochambers has been very actively engaged in, let's say, promoting green growth in India, specifically by running the European Business and Technology Center for the last 7 years, EBTC. You may have heard about that, you should have heard about that, because it's been a very important initiative funded by the European Union, essentially to promote European clean tech on the Indian market. Promote and adapt. And I'm very much going to let's say, react to what you said. The strategy that we have developed as a BTC is indeed not just focusing on transferring technology, but transferring and adapting technology to the Indian reality. This is essential, and I think any European businessman in the room that is considering trying to develop its relations with India is about transfer and adaptation to the local market. And in implementing EBTC over those last 6-7 years, just happy to say that you mentioned Tyre, Vito, we've been working with a lot of actually key players in the clean tech environment. I just want to, in 3-4 minutes, re-emphasize also towards the audience, and based on this very intense experience of EBTC, especially towards the European colleagues in the room, India clean tech opportunities are vast, are absolutely vast. There is so much that can be done, that needs to be done, where European business can provide the answer. And if you look at just that, just the recent developments, I think, if I'm not mistaken, India has signed the Paris Agreement just a month ago, something like that. Yeah. So that means India is now legally, if you want, committed, bound to achieve those climate targets, which implies identifying solutions, technologies that would help them to comply with those targets. So from a business potential, from a market potential, India just signed up to a great potential for European business. Secondly, maybe if you follow the recent initiatives from Mr. Modi that he has launched, the Skill India, Clean Ganges, and other initiatives, almost systematically there is that clean tech focus embedded, or sometimes it's fully about promoting clean technology. So just to emphasize that clearly from the Indian government perspective, there is obviously a consciousness, more than that, a willingness and appetite to invest in green technology. So the simple message towards the European entrepreneur is to say there is plenty of opportunity out there for you in India. At the same time, I speak on behalf of Eurochambers, European business, so I also have to show the other side, the downside. It's not an easy way forward. It's not an easy market to enter. We heard about it a little bit in the previous session. And I have just a few points here that we can dwell on that much longer, but just 5 quick challenges that have been identified, again, based on our experience. Number 1, and it goes back to what you were saying, is indeed the funding scheme. Who finances, or how do we finance especially large infrastructure projects in clean energy, clean technology? We've been reported, I'm not the expert on the ground, but by my people on the ground, funding is an issue. It's a pity the EIB expert is not with us, but European Investment Bank is engaged in India, but as I hear, hesitant towards some of these For example, the Clean Ganges initiative is not yet engaged, so I think we should encourage, maybe through the Project Development Commission, encourage the European Investment Bank to be a bit more proactive in financing, developing schemes in some of these clean technology infrastructure projects. I think that would be important. A second comment that we hear from these operations is that, and it's kind of, I guess, common to not just to this sector, there is still a discrepancy between what the central government is launching as important, very valuable initiatives, which we can all applaud, and then the implementation, the translation of those visionary programs into the region, into the states. So the coherence between national policy making in setting certain targets, certain objectives, and having them translated at the level of individual states across India, let's say that there is still a big gap, specifically again in this sector, which leads then sometimes to delays, disappointment from European investors who see the big plan in Delhi, so to speak, but then afterwards, when these plans are supposed to be translated into projects across the country, delays, change of IDs, change of priorities. So I think we should be careful there as well. Another point, difficult to address, is of course selling, the importance of clean tech, energy efficiency, consciousness about climate in India, let's face it, is not an easy task. And that is, of course, very much linked to the level of development. Many people in India still have a poor level of development, a low income level. It's absolutely normal that for them, climate change is not their number one priority. Their number one priority is to survive, to make sure they have food on the table for their families. So this is absolutely not about blaming these people, it's fully understandable. But again, as European entrepreneurs, as policymakers, we need to be conscious about that. That we cannot criticize the Indian population at large for not maybe taking our concerns as the number one, because they do have other concerns that come before that. I think we should be conscious in the back of our minds about those realities in India. So I'll stop here, just re-emphasizing the potential is absolutely there, I think even more than before, for European business. If you look at Indian government, its commitments it has taken, but European business needs to go in there with the right attitude, adapting. And again, EBTC has technically stopped as being a European program but continues to exist. So we still have people on the ground. You may know Paul Jensen as our director, who's been there for many years. He's still there to help you, to welcome you, to be successful on the Indian market. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyre. This is confirming what I was stating. So John, please, your views.
Yes, good afternoon. My name, despite what you see on the screen, I'm not Ms. Ursula Stepkowska, but John Basil, but I work in the same unit as Ursula, a unit that deals with trade, what we call trade and sustainable development, so including trade and environment issues. I'll maybe take as a point of departure a bit the sort of big picture in terms of trade policy, and then hopefully come in to focus a bit on your questions at the end. I mean, in terms of green growth, is a term we've been hearing about. The EU launched this initiative on circular economy recently, which has a lot of implications. There's also bio-based economy initiatives, different terms, but all going in the same direction, basically, about more efficiency, less pollution, and more renewable energy. And I think it's about green tech and energy, but I think we shouldn't forget the water dimension, especially in a country like India, water efficiency and clean water. And also, increasingly now in Europe anyway, we're thinking of circular economy, so recycling. So already when you're designing products, thinking about how they can be reused or repaired and so on. So this is all part of the evolution of thinking. In terms of trade policy, what can we do to help accelerate these developments? Well, an obvious area would be, or our sort of thinking is that if trade in these environmental products or environmental technologies is liberalized, if they become cheaper in the countries due to lower tariffs, then the uptake will be quicker. The sort of cycle of innovation can be accelerated. And so that's a direction we've gone down through a plurilateral negotiation in the WTO called Environmental Goods Agreement, which builds on a list of products which was developed by APEC. And APEC agreed to reduce tariffs to 5% on a number of about 50 products. And now we're taking that forward in these Environmental Goods Agreement negotiations. And this covers areas of renewable energy, but also waste management, air pollution control, water treatment, and environmental remediation. So quite a broad range of sectors. But I think, this idea that you'll have a faster uptake if through lower tariffs you kind of make it more affordable, has some attraction. I noticed, for instance, that India has 0% tariffs on solar panels, so I presume that was the thinking also to accelerate the uptake. But of course, on some other products, such as LEDs, it's 10%, so you can see there could be some room to accelerate that even further. But I think another important argument is that it's not just about reducing the price for consumers, but also, as was mentioned in the previous session, this whole concept of global value chain. So if you want to get in on this environmental technology sector, it's also about sourcing your inputs more cheaply in order to be able to export a competitive product. So this whole thinking is part of the reason why Costa Rica is in these negotiations, because it saw that it joined the ITA agreement on information technology. It meant that inputs became cheaper and big companies invested there, Intel and so on, in order to be able to export products. So whether or not India joins or not the EGA, I think these sort of principles are interesting to bear in mind. The second sort of big point I wanted to make is that through our talks with industry, we were aware of this, but it's very clear that you can't separate the goods from the services that are associated with them. So it's a package for many businesses. And maybe the panelists or the people here can comment whether this is particularly the case in environmental goods. I think it may be because you have such the products sort of interact with the environment as a systems approach, which means that you need a high level of management of the systems. So this means that we shouldn't just be thinking about the products, but also about the services that go with them and how companies can provide these services that go together with the products. So and I think that's in terms of services. The other sort of area which is evolving is on in terms of resource efficiency, different business models. So the idea of a lot of young people in European cities now are not even bothering buying cars because they have access to cars, which are on a shared basis, but you have an app and you call up your car around the corner. People don't have CD collections anymore, it's all, you have access to streaming and so on. So these trends will also be coming up in big Indian cities, and this is a way to sort of be more efficient with use of resources. So these are new, again, the services side of this tech, what green tech comes up there. So just wrapping up a bit in response to your questions, I can't really answer that. I think other people are on how innovation, how to make it appropriate in India. But I think an interesting point to bear in mind is the interplay between regulation and innovation. There is some OECD work on this which shows that, of course, arguably there's some cost to industry of complying with higher regulation, but it also opens opportunities because the technologies they develop can then be marketed internationally in this fast-growing sector. And I think the people in Delhi right now would be very grateful for some sort of better regulation in terms of emissions and getting on top of the air pollution. And then financial instruments, again, it's also about making attractive for investment and this global value chains idea. So that for making it attractive for private sector to invest and not beyond the sort of banks or European Investment Bank or donations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Is there anybody wanting to comment on what anybody else has been saying from the panel? No? Then I open up a question to the audience, if I may. What you've been hearing, what we would like is to have some view of entrepreneurs in the room. Are there any entrepreneurs in the room? Can you raise your hand? Yes. What do you want to ask us regarding what you see, green growth opportunities? What have you been seeing? Is there a micro, or can you shout out loud?
No, I can shout.
And let's say that we take 10 minutes, if nobody hinders us, to do this. So have your questions ready, be short, and then we try to answer as short as possible.
Okay,
Please.
great to see that we're both female entrepreneurs. So I would like to know what is being done to support frugal innovation. So that's the innovation created by the people at the grassroots, the people who are in the thick of the challenges, because these debates are all about big business, big trade. It's very rare that any of the money is being filtered down to those people who are making the differences in the communities. And that's where the biggest change is coming from. So how do we empower that, and what mechanisms are being put in place in the EU?
Thank you very much for the question. Can you just mention your name and your company, please?
Sorry, Maddy Sharma, Maddy Group, and I'm also a member of the European Economic and Social Committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I look at Dirk. Can you? Oh, sorry, the microphone. Ravi, and then you can. Yes,
Yeah.
please use this one.
Sure.
Oh.
I have a similar association question. It's a good point to start with. I'm Ravi Shankar, a packaging technologist, and now I have a company in Belgium. I actually have a similar thought in line. We are talking about big products, big companies, big technology, which is already available in Europe, but we are comparing with the country which is actually starting the energy needs in the remote villages, stuff like that. So is it fair to take the technology, which is very high, expensive, and tell the people to apply in a place where they don't have lights, they don't have clean water? So what is the European company's role in creating the frugal innovation and creating a product which is fit for the consumer at the right price?
Yes, thank you for these two questions. The first one is, how do you foster green root companies kicking off? Because it all seems like instruments for larger enterprises, very well-grown enterprises. And then secondly, also the question, how can you make sure that these technologies find their way? And I said I was going to pass the question, at least the answering, to Dirk.
Well, I don't have the answer, but I can only, again, referring to these 6-7 years of European Business and Technology Center experience that we've been coordinating. Without being the expert myself, I do know that we have brought a lot of European SMEs with a very, sometimes, I don't want to say basic technology, but a very modest technology, and make them work with entrepreneurs across India, very much in a local environment. And what I said before, very much about looking how can we adapt that technology, which may not be rocket science sometimes, but very appropriate in the local circumstances of that region, of that city, of that market. I'm trying to think on top of my head some concrete examples, but I know we have done that. quite successfully, and we have now European again SMEs that are being successful, and we should probably bring it more into the spotlight, because it's true when you talk about EU-India relations and you have the big infrastructure projects that hit the media, but there are, and let me actually talk to Paul back in Delhi, to come up with some concrete examples which illustrate the point actually that both of you have made. It is happening, again from our experience. I need to pick Paul's brains to come up and to share with some concrete examples maybe after this conference. But it is a model that does happen, that I can definitely confirm.
Can you ask your question?
Yes. I'm Ravi Malhotra, Chairman, European India Chamber. My question to the panel, to everyone, that you have discussed a lot for the green growth, but nobody has been able to discuss sequestration of CO2, which is very easy to develop and solve the problem instead of reinventing wheels in other places. We are already creating CO2 and how we can sequester. Thank you.
Ravi, can I first answer the question? Yeah. CO2 is everywhere. That's how I understand your question.
No, CO2, the world is producing a lot of CO2. Even animals are producing CO2, isn't it? Methane and CO2. How we can sequestrate that to clean our atmosphere? That is what is very easy and simple if we can develop that. Nobody is looking at that. We are throwing the CO2 in the atmosphere, but nobody is thinking how to collect it and deposit. It may become the future fuel of the world. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And while we're speaking, there are developments, there is research going on, but also first commercial attempts to have CO2 not only captured, and CO2 is available in every industrial site here when we move out and go to Antwerp and Brussels and so on, and also in India with all the industrial sites and concentrations. So yes, it's being researched, but also it's getting into commercialization efforts in order to sell even CO2 as a product to make new chemical ingredients. So that's being done. It's being done, for instance, not only by Vito alone, but by Vito and partners. And for instance, Vito and Tyre together are looking into this subject. And I'm sure because of the many events they organize around clean technologies, almost in all last editions of these events, CO2 capture and usage and commercialization even is one of the new pillars. So thank you for the question, but it's confirming that it's the right thing to do. If that's a concern, it is a concern. Well, we're moving into a situation where somebody will ask for CO2 if the market game will change one day. So it's getting there, but it's still expensive because you were commenting it's easy to capture it. Yes, perhaps to capture, but to make sure that it's getting into a valuable and sellable product, it takes some research and budgets. I hope this answers your question.
Partly. The reason is because we have a lot of oil fields which are empty over the 70 years we have been putting. They are empty. We can sequestrate, we can collect the CO2 and capture there. And then when the technology is there, we can take it out and use it. Otherwise, in 200-300 years after, that itself will be fossil fuel available to us. Thank you.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, there's also a frugal technology which would be planting trees.
It's a green technology. Okay, we can further elaborate during the coffee break, which will follow immediately. Sunil, we need to finish? Yes. So all other questions, take them to the coffee break. Thank you. Thank you, panel.